And the purpose of what is at issue here is avoiding a 28-day time period in making a change to board policy. That is there for the simple reason that the public needs to have time to be aware. We are a public agency. So I don't think that, I think that gutting transparency and openness and opportunity for public input is quite unacceptable. Second, at the risk of stepping on Mr. Humberston's legal toes here, I would just point out to you, to the board, that there is an issue called prior restraint of free speech. That issue has come up in connection with Clackamas River Water litigation against Commissioner Mitchell and me. And as you, I expect, are aware through Mr. Phillips, the appellate court has agreed to hear the appeal, which is an appeal on prior restraint of free speech. Had the appellate court not thought that was a solid legal issue, I do expect they would have simply rejected the appeal and not be wasting any time on it. So what you are proposing here is, in fact, the prior restraint of free speech. Second, the wording of this, which perhaps you have not thought through, would prohibit the board, every one of us who has a fiduciary responsibility relative to the audit and other financial issues of Clackamas River Water, from even so much as holding a discussion with the auditor. Second, if you read the insurance policies state that any insured party who believes that they are, that a claim has presented is obligated to report it as soon as practicable to the insurance company. That is not a board decision. That is a requirement of the insurance policy. The wording as it is constructed, if we apply it, for example, to the question of the payment of some $27,000 to Mr. Nixon, would suggest that, well, not suggest, would mandate that any member of the board who becomes, I'm not using that as an example of a crime, but should it be found to be a crime, any member of the board who determines or is concerned that say our old $70,000 embezzlement had occurred, would be prohibited from taking that information outside without the approval of the board. And so my question to each of you is, number one, I think you're doing something that you can't legally do. Number two, do you really want to put yourselves in a situation of violating the insurance policy, violating our responsibilities as board members relative to the audit? Doesn't make sense to me.
Any more comment?
I could respond to that.
Bradley?
I hear desperation in this document from Mr. Moore with the recall vote coming up March 19th and elections in May, Dr. Sola. The appellate court has agreed to hear the issue that has been presented to it. A mandamus is being completed and will be sent to the Supreme Court of Oregon.
Tomorrow.
There's a lot of issues here that are going to be taken very carefully. Now, you take a look at the documents, whether you choose to or not, or whether you want to participate or not, and see the tremendous errors bordering on malfeasance by Judge Jones. It's just unbelievable. So, you know, I think probably the best thing to do, at least in my humble opinion, if you want to start to change things in this book, let's wait until June, July, or August. And perhaps we'll have some further insight as to where the Supreme Court and Appellate Court will be looking at our actions. Because I'm not interested in taking and closing my eyes to inappropriate spending and paying somebody $27,000 for their personal attorney.
Ken?
Well, there's nothing in this policy that prevents anybody on this board from reporting a crime. So if you need to report a crime, I certainly think you should do so. As far as the appellate court's ruling on a different case, there's no indication at this point what that ruling will be, or even if it applies. Third, if you need to get information, you're not being prohibited from getting it. You simply ask the general manager to get it for you. Or the board president and a majority vote of the board can actually waive the policy and ask you to go get something if that's necessary. The primary issue here is that when you act as an individual without acting as a board, as a part of the board, with the board's okay on something, essentially, it causes us problems and lawsuits. And we should be functioning as a board, not independently of one another. As far as getting information from the insurance company, getting information from our finance officer, or any of the other employees in the district, I have found it over the last 3 months quite easy to do by following the policy. I call the general manager on the phone. I ask him to set up an appointment for me with, for example, Ms. Bright. He sets up an appointment for me. A block of time is set aside. I'm able to do what I need to do, find out the information I need to find out. It's very simple. It's very easy. I have never been prevented from talking to staff members as long as I've gone through the process. The problem is when people choose to go out on their own, outside the process, outside the confines of the board, and act on their own. And that's why we have so many lawsuits. So hopefully this will either stop some of that from happening, or at the very least will take our insurance company and this board and this district off the hook when somebody goes outside the scope of their authority. That's my argument for it. That's it.
Mr. President, we now have public comment.
Oh, Mr. Kalani, I think, had a comment.
Yeah, Mr. Kalani and then me.
As far as I'm concerned, this does nothing to add any problems to the board. There have been quite a few examples in the few months that I've been involved in the CRW of individuals circumventing the board and going around staff, making arrangements with what would be bidders on proposed contracts. And I don't think that's correct. I think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. It leaves 3 or 4 of us outside the governance of the district. And it also, in some cases, it has left the management and staff outside, and where they've been backdoored with certain proposals. So
You have to back that up,
I'm in
Mr.
favor.
Kalani.
What?
You have to back that up. You can't
Would
just
you,
throw out accusations.
Hold on. Well, if there's one example of several, is the insurance problem we have. We lost our insurance, so our agent of record went out, got us some. In the meantime, he got 2 bids, 3 bids actually, 3 different outfits. Somebody had made arrangements with a different agency to come down here and make a presentation. It wasn't from the board, it wasn't from the staff. No, it wasn't. You're pointing at President Soa, it wasn't him.
If I may, Chair Sola. It's a total waste of time. I quite agree with you. However, that contact and that appointment were made at the request of Chair Sola. And I don't.
Chair Sola's not always right.
Yeah, well, but you see what I'm saying, Mr. Kalani, you're throwing this stuff out and, you know, I don't.
I'm following your example.
And Mr. Humberston certainly. Relative to the crime coverage, if you read the policy, you will find that there is an obligation to report. I would have to say from my own experience, and the legal services invoices are probably an excellent example, as are the missing pieces of information from the insurance application, which were never given to the board. We've not received those. You obviously, it appears that Secretary Humberston enjoys a greater access perhaps than I, but we just have a from my perspective, staff in the form of the general manager is simply not forthcoming with information, even when it's agreed that it will be, and even when the board's instructed that it should be. So, you know, I don't believe that it is an accurate statement that all we have to do is ask the general manager to get what we want by way of information. And I would point out, since commissioners have been throwing out a lot of stuff tonight, that it is Clackamas River Water who has sued me. Clackamas River Water, through Commissioner Kehoe, who filed the ethics complaint against me. All of those were defeated. A lot of ratepayer money was spent there, for sure. Thousands of dollars were spent arguing with the district attorney about whether public employee gross salary information is public information. The district attorney declared definitively that it is. It goes on and on. And, you know, I fully expect you guys are just gonna go ahead and vote this in, but I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's legal. And I would suggest that you might acquaint yourselves with Oregon state law, because if a commissioner does something that is outside, then of course the commissioner does not have any protection. The penalty that you are concerned about is already fully in place. And
Then it shouldn't be a problem.
well then, so why, why do you insist on doing this?
For the reasons cited.
Pardon?
For the reasons cited. Just answer your
We'll
question.
now have public comment. Anyone in the audience? Cindy?
Briefly, Chair, so Commissioner Holloway just stated that the insurance company requires, there's an obligation to report. I don't believe that in anywhere in your insurance that if the obligation to report states it has to be the individual themselves reporting to the insurance company. The obligation to report is there to the facility of what you, or process that you use, whether it be your HR person or the insurance person or the general manager. I believe what you have to do is report those accidents or that crime through the process that you use. But that she is correct, that we do have, or you do have as CRW, an obligation to report. What this rule is asking you to do is to fully understand where your reporting must be. This is saying that as board members, you act as board members consistently, and that you don't go around the services that are provided to you by staff, and that you don't interrupt the services provided to you by staff, and to provide it to us, more importantly. Provide it to us, the ratepayers, who are sitting out here continually watching things happen at this board that happen because people are not doing their job. They're trying to do other people's jobs. So I think this just tells you as a board, please do your job. Do it correctly. And it gives you another place to look to tell you how to step that block. Thank you.
We'll now have a vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No?
We'll now go on to informational reports. You've been sitting there for a long time.
Good evening, Carol Bride, Chief Financial Officer for Clackamas River Water. We will get started with our monthly financial reports with our accounts receivable aging. This is the aging that is post the December bills. And so we have been collecting at a pretty reasonable rate. We're about the same place we were a year ago at this time with aging. The 90 and over column is a little bit higher than we would like to see. We did find that some of our larger one of our larger accounts had misplaced a payment, and we have now done the affidavit for the lost check, and they will be paying that one. We've also got some customers that have had some leaks, and because we don't have leak relief in this year's budget, we've extended a little bit longer payment terms for those customers to allow them to pay for their water. With our cash and investment position, as of this time, the interest earnings on the local government investment pool haven't been posted. I think I may have mentioned this before. The interest is the last thing that we post at the end of a month, and it takes a little while to get our capital improvement dollars moved around, and we allocate interest based on the reserve balances in each fund. So this month, instead of giving you a lot of words in my presentation as I usually do, I've created some graphs here. So here is a comparison of where our revenues are this year through 6 months of the year compared with the last 4 years at the same time period. I have the interest from other funds on there. Back in 2009, we used to actually earn some interest. Now we get 0.6%, so it barely shows up at the top of those columns. The SDC revenue is the pale yellow, and you can see that that's pretty insignificant. And I guess one of the most important things to note about this graph is that we are nearly 100% reliant on water rate revenues.
If I may.
Yes.
Ms. Bright, now that you mentioned SDCs, I would again restate my request that the board be given the accounting over these past several years for the SDC split between
Reimbursement
and
improvement.
improvement. Thank you for the terminology.
I always forget those two.
There, I know you said the other day that you didn't have that percentage split in hand. I know this is information I've been trying to get since
It's a
last
30-70% split. And if you go on the website and look at the rates, there you can see the, actually no, it might not be on there yet. It will be soon though. The entire miscellaneous fees and charges book will be posted on the website, and it will show you the dollars collected for reimbursement and improvement. I believe we're at 70% reimbursement. Is that right, Adam, or am I backwards?
So.
And the 30% reimbursement.
Okay, and what about the annual accounting? How much money is in those funds?
That you can find in the CAFR, but I will tell you that if we spend all of the money that we plan for CIP this year, we will be down to less than $1 million in the SDC fund. So the SDC funds, when we created the SDC fund and carved it out of our grand Clackamas reserve fund, we had a little over $6 million. And that was done in fiscal 2010. And we have spent SDC money on both capital improvement projects as well as on debt service. They pay a portion of the debt service. And if we do spend $3 million this year on capital improvements, and I think some of those are being slowed down, not necessarily through any fault of our own. We've got Carver Bridge, there's been some delays on that. So we won't spend all of that money. But if we did spend what was budgeted, and again, you can find that in the budget document, we would be down to about $500,000 in the SDC fund.
So if I'm understanding you, then, if we look at the total SDC fund, you're telling us that 70% of that is for reimbursement and 30% is for improvement, is that correct?
Again, I might be backwards, but yes, that's how we collect it. It's a 70-30% split. And then when we spend the money, Bob determines whether it's a improvement or a reimbursement to the system, depending upon what the project is.
Okay, well, it would be very much appreciated if you could clarify that in your mind so that you can let us know what the actual split is. And I would repeat my request for the annual accounting of that, at least for the most recent fiscal year, which is an obligation under Oregon law, so we must have it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So now I've done a similar graph showing the expenditure comparison, again, over the same 5 years through the same 6-month period. And we have this split between personnel services, materials and services, and capital outlay. Again, the capital outlay is a smaller amount and varies a lot more greatly than the others. So in some of those places, you can see the little yellow bits at the top, and other places that are pretty small. So again, here's a chart that shows what our comparison is from this year at this time compared with last year at this time. So you can see that our revenues are up significantly, so are our water sales. We have sold more volume of water. So a portion of this is due to the rate increase, and a portion of it is just due to larger volumes of water being sold this year. It's hard to remember now when we're in the cold, damp winter, but we did have a pretty warm, dry summer, at least for a couple of months there.
Yeah, my water bill reflected that.
So this is our second quarter review. We provided to the board in your board packet the line item cost, and just wanted to kind of go through a few things that I've noticed as we've gone through. We appropriated the budget at those high, broad categories of personnel services, material services, and capital outlay. We have not exceeded any of those categories. But we did have some watershed management costs that came in that we had anticipated to be in last fiscal year, so did not include sufficient budget in that line item. So we do have an additional $20,000 that was spent in 2013 that we thought was going to be spent in 2012. In our contract work, we did some paving at the Henry Z tank site that was not in the budget, and our general paving is coming in a little higher than anticipated. We're a little over 50% on that. We've also had a few other things. We had a phone outage system that we had to bring in a contractor to help us fix, and the safe where we keep the money and the checks secure. The battery died when it was locked. So we had to get somebody to come in and get that taken care of for us. Those are not significant dollars. We've also, with the updated website that was rolled out last October, we do have a service that maintains the web data for us. And there are openings in my department, in the finance, accounting, and customer service department, so we have brought in some temporary help. So that was another item that was not included in the budget. The dues and memberships, the Regional Water Consortium, we did not have their numbers when we created the budget. They came in about $3,000 over. And as you know, our new insurance cost is higher than what was in the budget. So what have we done to mitigate that? Are there things that we're not doing? We did have a financial modeling item that we had purchased from the Government Finance Officers Association last year. It didn't provide anything that we couldn't already do without it, so we've chosen not to renew that this year. We did change the janitorial company, and so that has lower cost. although I believe we're out to bid again because the service has not been what we expect. And we have limited some additional landscape activities. We may have some spring cleanup activities that'll happen, but we are below 50% on the building and grounds maintenance. Also in the training category, we're below 50%. We do have a significant amount of training that comes up in the spring. A lot of the recertification training happens in May, so we won't see that till the fourth quarter reports. And we've also, some of the contract work, some of it is evenly distributed throughout the year, such as the meter reading and the bill printing, but there's some of it that we're waiting till better weather before we do that. And the general legal services so far this year are well under 50%. So if you look at the line items, you'll see that there are some items that are greater than 50%. And here's some examples of some of those and kind of an explanation of why they are what they are. The workers' comp is less than 100%, but it is an annualized amount and we are paid in full for the year. Credit card processing fees, a little bit higher than 50%, but those are based on percentages of the charges. So when our customers have their larger bills in the summer and pay that with a credit card, then those fees are a little higher. So we feel that we'll come in on budget with that. Our assessments and taxes are paid in full for the year. Dues and memberships looks high, and I had already mentioned that the Regional Water Consortium was $3,000 over budget, but that one we paid the annualized amount. So we have others that we pay, Clackamas River water providers we pay quarterly. The audit, the work is complete. The audit was completed by December 31st. We did get some final bills in January, and I believe maybe early this month. So those numbers will wrap up, but we will be under budget. Our equipment maintenance is high, and as we were working through the budget last year, we determined that equipment maintenance and vehicle maintenance, we kind of reduced those amounts and determined that we would do maintenance as needed. So the equipment maintenance is a little high, the vehicle maintenance is a little low, so I think overall we're still going to be fine in those categories. Water purchases is a little over 50%, but again, higher volume of usage in the summertime. And the watershed management, where I had mentioned the carbon study costs that came in later than we thought. So, other items of note, where do we go from here? I believe the board is aware of the couple of main breaks at Redland Road that involved a lot of staff time. Ops was there with their immediate response and repair engineering to make sure that we were handling the system and repairing it appropriately. Water quality spent a significant amount of time out there flushing and testing to make sure that everything was okay. Additionally, the water loss did some damage to some of the ditches, so the Clackamas County road crew had to be out there. We had anticipated that cost on itself might be $25,000, but we just heard today, I believe Don asked the county to please be nice to us on this, so they determined that enough, part of it was theirs and part of it was ours, so the bill's about $10,000. So we did save about $15,000 there. In the future, there was sufficient damage to the road that we will be required by the county to do a half-street improvement there next summer. That will wait until appropriate weather for that, so that'll be something we'll talk about with the budget. And we also, for these breaks, had additional equipment rental and excavation work that was not included in the budget. So, some more items of note. We will be having a special election on March 19th. As far as I know, the only thing on the ballot is us, so we will be responsible for the total cost, and that is estimated to be about $17,000. We also have had some capital outlay issues. We cut capital outlay this year down to a budget of $93,000, but we had to do some pump repair on Harmony Road, and that was not budgeted. And we've got some large meters for our commercial accounts that we go through and test the meters on a regular basis, and we have tested meters that we now know need to be replaced. The issue with the large meters is that they directly impact our revenue. When the meters go bad, they don't read too much, they don't read enough. So we will be having to replace those meters and sooner rather than later. So we'll have to look at what other things in capital outlay we may be able to avoid, or if we just need to do a budget transfer, and if so, I'll be coming back to the board with that request. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you. We're down to management report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The general manager's report, as you know, is an informational report. And what I did in your booklet under A1 is a report that we received in a meeting that was attended with the Oregon Water Utilities Council. And what we were doing was listening to a legislative overview. I attached those materials in your binder. It looks like there are 3 key pieces of legislation that might affect us, assuming that they work their way through the legislature. The one that is of, I think, significant import for us is the water resources budget. It looks like what the governor's plan is to continue to remove general fund dollars from that agency and make it on a user fee basis, on a fee paid basis. And that's a proposal that's in the budget. The Oregon Water Utilities Council has endorsed that. There is a concern, however, that once we begin down that path, it's hard to turn back. And it looks like they're asking for 15 new positions as a part of that. And they're hoping to, I believe, raise about $12 million from the various utilities around the state in order to cover for those costs. So I think that's something that we will need to continue to watch. The other item that you have under A2, there's a Metro Brown Bag meeting, which is over the lunch hour. That's under A2. And it was basically a forecasting meeting. I did attach the materials that were handed out there for your reading if you care to inquire further about what was discussed there. But essentially, as you know, Metro is a bunch of planners, and I'm not sure they get it right, but needless to say, the information is included. The January 28th, we had a COOP, the Continuity of Operations Planning internal. As you know, we received a grant from the federal government, and we're continuing to work internally on trying to meet the commitments under that particular grant. So we will essentially be prepared in the event that there were an emergency within our service area. And also, it probably extends a little bit beyond also some of the other regional players that basically through the CRWP is some of our regional players as well, but we're focusing more on CRW. And we'll have a brief presentation at the end of my report that talks a little bit more detail about what's included in all of that. We had a new board orientation on January 29th, where we went over some of the district issues. We talked about water treatment, and we took commissioners on a tour of the facilities. Under 8.5, we've continued our meetings with Beaver Creek Telephone Company. It looks like we have an agreement in concept where have passed the responsibility on to their attorneys in order to save costs, to have them present us with a proposal of what they think that they heard, what they believe that we have agreed to That information, once it gets in draft form, will be presented to the board here, so you have an opportunity to react to the specifics. And if all is agreeable, it would then return to the Beaver Creek Board, and we could finalize that information.
Chair Summer,
Yes.
I'd like to determine whether the default extension that expired on January the 31st has been extended, and request that the board be given a copy of it. That was one of my agenda requests that doesn't seem to have been handled.
We'd be more than happy to provide that to the board.
It has been done, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
The next item is A6. I think there was a request as well for a status on this. You heard earlier that in October we launched the revised website. In talking with the board chair and board secretary, we thought that it was probably appropriate, since in October when it was launched, we didn't really have formal meetings and the like, to hold that for a work session at a later date, I believe sometime in March, where we have an opportunity to present that to the board, so for your review and see, to show you how it functions. And the following item, A7, we have been experienced.
Chair Summer.
Yes.
I'd just like to go back for a moment to A6, where I know I've been surprised because our historic records kind of come and go on the website. And this says, staff met to review the site's content and make changes to the document retention schedule. Is it staff's position that the board has no input on any of that, since that particular portion is the section of the website that gives the public access to our minutes, videos, or not minutes, our quote excerpts of record, videos, etc.
Yeah?
Would I assume correctly that once the staff have prepared their recommendations on the website, that that will be brought to the board? If there's something that we don't like, we would like to see changed, we would have the opportunity to do so at that time?
That is correct. And what we're talking about in terms of document retention, it meant, I think Commissioner Sterling had requested that some information be taken down. And so we use it as an opportunity to meet and discuss. And part of our presentation in March will include what our recommendation will be, or how we intend to proceed, and it will give the board an opportunity to respond at that point. We, along with several other users out there, are beginning to experience a lot of difficulty with our cell phone provider, Sprint. They merged with Nextel, and as a result, they're changing their network, and a lot of the devices are beginning to fail, literally, where we can't communicate with each other. And so we're in the process of meeting with various providers to see what the alternative is and trying to see if there's a better system. We also have an issue in terms of our emergency response capability, and we're looking at our 800 hertz radios in addition to all that. As you know, in Clackamas County, we have a lot of terrain issues in terms of reception and the like, and we need to make sure that whichever device we pick will function best within the environment that we have. And so as we get more information on that, because we've met with Verizon, we've met with Sprint Nextel, and we've had some discussions with AT&T, and we will continue to have problems just because of the area that we reside in, but we want to see which one is best equipped to be able to handle the needs that we have as an organization. So that's more of a heads up. Under A8,
Just a
we're,
second.
yes,
How many cell phones do we have?
I believe we have about 25, I think that sounds about right, about 25. And that's another thing that we're looking at is, do we need all of those? You know, that's something that, and one of the difficulties that we have is that you can't always go by use, because if somebody's out there in the field, if they don't use it on a regular basis, but if they do need to be contacted, then you need them to have the device and so. But we still need to monitor that to make sure that people, that we're not paying for more than we need. The other thing that we're doing as part of our internal planning, and we need it as part of our rate study, and we need to know it as part of our internal standards, is that we're doing a water audit update. With a simple word for that is that we're looking at how much water loss we have by various areas throughout our system. And that information will be captured and will help us with future planning. We have under A9 a water quality issue that's kind of bugged us for the last year and a half. We have a customer who, if for some reason, is getting rust in his water or metal particulates in his water. And it seems to be seasonal. It seems to be an anomaly. I don't really believe in coincidences. And from a water quality point of view, what we see it really is when he tries to fill up a swimming pool. And what happens, he ends up with rust elements in the water. We've flushed the line on numerous occasions. We've given him some credits as a result of getting bad water. But the bigger issue is, what's the source of the problem and what it's going to take to fix it? And so that's what we're working on.
Joseph,
Yes.
is that customer in the area where we have blended well water and South Fork Water Board water?
No, that's,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
We have several customers in that system, but he seems to be the only one that's having the difficulties and understanding what's going on. We've had some discussions in the past about the nature of the rate study that we're doing. As you know, both the rate committee, the budget committee, and the board has asked staff to do a full-blown rate study. And we've talked in the past about there being various elements contained within that study. And so I thought I'd share with the board what those 4 primary elements are. And the first is the revenue requirements, and that's what we went through when we brought in FCS Group last spring. But the other 3 elements of the rate study is what we're working on now. It is our intent that by the end of March, that rate study will be complete. As you'll recall, in some of our more recent meetings, the board has expressed some concern about the board being involved and being able to interact with the FCS group. I think we're planning up to 3 meetings where the board would have an opportunity to interact with the rate study group. But those elements that we'll be talking about in addition to the revenue requirements is the benchmark analysis. I think we've given you prior data on what companies that we're looking at to be benchmarking ourselves against. The cost of service element and the wholesale rate review and analysis are the 4 elements that are included in a completed rate study. And so when we get that information, and one of the things we'll be asking the board when we get feedback from FCS Group is when and how we want to schedule that, because it's probably going to take at least 2 or 3 meetings in the month of March in order to get information from the board in that meeting. And I suspect we're looking at daytime meetings, but we'll look to the board's guidance for that. We'll make a recommendation, but we'll look to you all to tell us whether or not you want more than that. The insurance documents, we have received copies of the policies on both our D&O and general liability insurance. And we've also, under tab A11, received our last reimbursement from SDAO for the longevity credit of $17,730. So that's money that was, I didn't think we were going to get it, but they did forward us a check, and so we have that. As you've heard, and I won't spend any time on it, we've had several breaks on the Redland Road that staff has been working on, and now the engineering group is working to see whether or not some of the proposed changes that we're intending to make there is going to be adequate to meet our needs in peak demand periods, because we moved from a larger line to a smaller line, and we need to make sure during peak whether or not the pressure requirements that are needed will suffice in the smaller line. We lost approximately 187,000 gallons during the first break and 337,000 gallons in the second break. It was pretty significant, and as you heard from staff, we've had some repair costs that have been passed on to us from various entities. The last item that I have in the management report is that there are some informational items that came through, and as you know, our policy is those requests from the board are submitted to the board secretary, and the board secretary, the board president, along with staff, sits down and reviews those. And so under tab B is where those requests are. We talked about the rate study and the elements contained there too, and I think that speaks for itself. Under B2, I think there was a request by Commissioner Holloway about the indexing of meeting minutes. That's something else that we would cover during the March work session. I believe that had to do with I wasn't quite sure, but I believe it had to do with the website itself, if I'm not mistaken. And then under B3.
Answer this question.
Yeah.
The question stands regardless of the website. The issue is that we are supposed to have indices of the meetings that will allow members of the public to review the official minutes, which are the audio recordings. And they were supposed to have topics, votes, and so on. They've morphed into interpretive encyclopedias at this point, which is one concern. The other concern is that there are multiple meetings where we have no summaries posted whatsoever. And they seem to have just kind of fallen off the map. So they may exist. If they do, I have no access to them other than on the website. So that's the concern. Somebody who has a disc that lasts a couple of hours of audio needs a guide as to know where to go to find out what they want to listen to.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Holloway, we were thinking that's probably what you were referring to, and we intend to have a recommendation with some examples at the March meeting, so you can look at those, see if that meets the needs that you have requested and prior instruction. Quite frankly, I think you're correct in what we had said initially versus what has happened here. We talked about the website, the personnel manual. I think we've handed out those, so the board has those. Those that wanted it electronically have gotten it electronic. That's the disc that Commissioner Holloway has. And then some of you wanted printed versions, and we've handed those out. So that completes my manager's report. And then Don will talk about emergency management for about 5 or 10 minutes.
The clock is ticking. Don Bender, Operations Manager, Clackamas Water. The purpose of this presentation tonight is to meet a requirement that we would normally fulfill in November. On an annual basis, we're supposed to come to the board and give them an update on emergency management at Clackamas Water. So I'm going to lay a foundation for moving forward in the future. give you some of the many acronyms that we have to deal with. And I apologize to Commissioner Holloway because she's seen some of this before. The whole purpose here is to put a context around some of the grant money that we're getting also. Emergency management, it's all about dealing with the different types of disasters and events that we may encounter: floods, windstorms, power outages. Our biggest fear in the region right now is the Cascadia Fault that lies off the Oregon coast. It's scheduled to go off about once every 500 years, and we're at about 320. So, we're also dealing with man-made emergencies, vandalism at our pump stations or reservoirs, potential contamination such as diesel trucks falling in the river and having to deal with that, state and IT intrusions, and acts of terrorism. Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
What's the status on the city of Estacada and their waste treatment plant? And the high rate of, their area is redlined in the program that we paid for to determine what's going into the river at the, what's the Gladstone CRW?
Yeah. Oh,
What's the one behind the razor wire fence?
oh, NCCWC.
NCCWC.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure where you were.
So, do you have any idea?
That's outside my area of expertise. Suzanne DiLorenzo has some work that I believe she's going to be doing with some of that. I don't know if it's directly involved, affects the Estacada plant and what's happening there. I believe that's a DEQ West issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, she just left, so, sorry. But she does have a report on that. She has looked into it, and we're out of harm's way. And if you'd like, we can talk in more specific detail if the board would like.
So one of the things that we look at from an emergency management standpoint is risk and consequence. What's the risk that something's going to happen? The Cascadia quake is an example. Will it happen? Yeah, we just don't know when. You rank those risks, how much damage are they going to do? Then a consequence, and again, that's how much damage is going to occur. It uses the same type of scale. One of the things you have to consider in emergency management, what's your acceptance level? So, minor event, could you do without water for a week, a month, 3 months? What can you actually, where do you actually need to go with that? House Resolution 03 was passed last November. It was a requirement for Oregon to begin resilience planning, and you're going to hear a lot more about that in the future. It's basically, I believe there'll be requirements for making things earthquake-proof in the future. They're going to work with the schools, the bridges, water infrastructure, buildings, and other things. From an emergency management standpoint, we use the incident command system that came out of the fire industry, and it is a systematic tool used for command, control, and coordination of emergency response. The firemen and the police folks do it all the time. That's one of the things that we've been trained in the last couple of years. All of this funnels up into the National Incident Management System, which is a nationwide system of response, and we've got a lot of practice at it over the last few years with Katrina and wildfires and the tornadoes that have struck. As you'll notice in consent agenda 2, I believe it is, for the emergency management equipment, it says in there that we are NIMS compliant. The way they do that is a survey, which is an assessment of an agency's ability and actions that they're taking for planning, training, and communications. And once you fill that survey out, you basically become NIMS compliant. You don't have to meet all the requirements, but you do have to set up an action plan for coming in or completing the tasks that's going to be done. We actually helped Sunrise complete that process last year. They were able to get some emergency management equipment also because of it. We're involved area-wide with the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. Within that group, there's 11 working groups. Public Works is one of them. There's a PIO, Public Information Group, Communications, Transportation, and they're all eligible if they're NIMS compliant as an agency for grant funding. They split that money up amongst the different groups. We're active with the regional water providers, Consortium Emergency Planning Committee. We just met Tuesday to discuss some reprogramming funds that are becoming available. We're going to be putting forward several projects as a region for more equipment that we can use to make us better prepared to respond. All of the money that comes to Clackamas River Water is now being funneled through the Clackamas County Office of Emergency Management. I was involved with, just had started attending the Homeland Security Task Force meetings when they came out with some reprogramming funds, and that's how we got the funding for the COOP project. That's rolling along. It was a $40,000 grant, and we just received a check for $21,500. Urban Area Security Initiative. The Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization was called the UASI Group. They got some grant funding to study how they were working as a group in the region, and there was a lot of duplication. And what they really figured out was that they needed the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, that goes all the way from the political level to the boots on the ground, and that they redefined the UASI region in the grant as just simply a funding stream for the grant money. And the whole point of the UASI grant is to enhance emergency preparedness in the region. It covers a 5-county region: Columbia, Clatsop, Clackamas, Washington, and Clark County. And in order to get the money, you have to be NIMS compliant to receive funds. It was originally based on terrorism. That's really was the main focus. The police and fire folks were getting all sorts of pretty fancy equipment. And they came to realize that with the tornadoes and the hurricanes, that they really needed to have an all-hazards focus.
So the guys up there in the city of Portland urinating in the facility up there didn't have anything to do with any of this then, right?
Well, that could be considered a terrorist event, but they're not
okay.
having that.
Good for you, Doc. Good for you.
So the one thing to keep in mind on the assets, we are housing a whole assets. We will be receiving more. We own this equipment. And as you look at the consent agenda, we're going to be asking the board to just acknowledge receipt of some of that. And that's just a process for the board to be involved with us as we move forward. We own the equipment. We're not required to deploy. So if we received a call from another agency, we would have the right to say, you know what, we need it here. We can't help you. Sorry. I would hope that if we were in a position to deploy, we would. So that would be a decision by the group. We're involved with several mutual aid agreements. ORWAR, Water Wastewater Agency Response Network. It's a pre-existing agreement that if Eugene Water and the Electric Board had a major event and they needed help, there's a website where they could go and ask for resources. We've actually posted some of our equipment so that they know if they know what they need, they can go find it on the list. They know how to get a hold of us so we can go help them out. We don't have to have a declaration of a disaster to be able to do that, and that's one of the advantages of having, rather than waiting for the government to get involved, they can go direct to the agencies. We have an agreement, a mutual aid agreement with Clackamas County, and also with the Cooperative Public Agencies of Washington County. They're a lot better at this than we are in Clackamas County. They've been at it a while longer. Emergency preparedness, ORWAR conference. I'm going to just blow through this, but one of the things that Ken Murphy, who at that time was the head of Oregon Emergency Management, said that because of the number of disasters, that there would be a move towards resilience in the communities, and that's what we saw with House Resolution 3. And that conference was actually 4 or 5 years ago. He's now the head of FEMA Region 10, so we have a pretty good contact for Oregon with the FEMA agency. What are we looking at in the future? We're going to be seeing UASI grant funds for the next 2 to 3 years because they put the money out there. It's not always spent, and so they put it out for reprogramming. We don't know what the future is going to look like there. We barely made the funding for 2012 because there's a whole lot of regions nationwide. It's a very competitive process. We just don't know what that's going to look like in the future. Homeland Security grant funding, we just don't know. I've only heard of one allocation of funds, and we were able to participate within that to get COOP funding. We've got an emergency operations plan that needs updating and will need continual updating as we move forward. as staffs change and capabilities change, that plan needs to grow with, or adapt with the organization. We'll be conducting training and exercises for our continuity of operations plan and our emergency operations plan. And the whole cycle is plan, train, exercise, evaluate, and then update with the lessons you learn from those exercises. Again, we'll be having an annual board update in November, and periodic reporting is, you know, if we learn more, or there's something that's worth bringing forward. I went through that pretty fast.
Yeah. Clearly, the grants have bought a lot of equipment for emergency preparedness, and as you call it, resilience. But there's obviously going to be costs in maintaining that equipment. Is that a cost that is borne by the ratepayer, or do we get grants for that also?
We will, the district will be picking up those costs.
Obviously, all of the emergency preparedness kinds of things are not a direct service to the ratepayer, but are rather an indirect thing in case of an emergency. Do we have any sense of or can we get a sense of roughly how much of our costs or our budget go to that kind of indirect but necessary service? I think this might be something that ratepayers would be interested in. You know, you think about $1.66 for a unit of water delivered to your house, but you don't necessarily think about all these other things that actually need to be there if something goes wrong.
Most of the equipment that we've got, we will be utilizing for the benefit of the ratepayer.
Right.
In the back of your packet on the consent agenda, I did include a couple of pictures of the equipment that we're going to get. The saws, for example, were used on Redland Road, and it saved the district money because of the way these saws are used versus the equipment that we were using. We didn't have to dig quite as big holes to get a pipe to cut it out so that we could replace it. It's just one example. The water systems will take staff time for training. We'll use them in drills. There's some maintenance items that will need to be replaced. But I'll see if I can come up with it, or I don't want to throw something out there.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to have an answer tonight or anything, but it's just a curiosity at this point. It'd be kind of interesting to know how much of our budget goes towards something that essentially is not a direct, but rather an indirect benefit to the ratepayer. So it's not critical, but when you get a chance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report. We're now down to this consent agenda, and the item on it is CA1. We have a motion.
I would move to approve CA1.
Second.
Any comment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain.
Thank you.
Now we have CA2. Do we need to act on it today?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, of our other two colleagues. You asked for two specific kinds of items to be removed from the consent agenda on a regular basis. Would you reiterate what those are so that I can get with Adora and we can construct the agenda to meet your needs on that?
The information that falls under CA2?
All of it? Just as a separate action item? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
We're there, go ahead.
Well, I don't have a presentation prepared for this because it was consent agenda, but I would be happy to answer any questions about the payroll and accounts paid for the month of February.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion.
I'll move to approve item CA2.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
No.
You're down to commission business.
I have one item here I'd like to suggest for discussion here or some sort of action. It was forwarded to me from staff that CRW has been receiving billings for an ad that was run in, I guess, November. Now we're past due. There are 2 late fees in past due for 2 months. Staff didn't apply for these ads to be run in the Portland Tribune community newspapers, and I don't know what they were about. I haven't seen them myself, but apparently sometime earlier at a previous meeting, they were given to Commissioner Holloway to pay because it was something that she had done, some ads that she had taken out, but they haven't been paid. We're still getting notices from the newspaper. So I'm wondering, what do we want to do with them?
Is the board authorized the ad?
As far as I know, they didn't.
Yeah, I can shed some light on that. The ad was placed in connection with the petition for declaratory judgment regarding the appointment of Commissioner Jeffrey Monroy to the CRW board. And it allowed a public notice to be published through Exempro, which is the legal requirement. The information I want to share with the board is that tomorrow they have a petition for writ of mandamus is going into the Supreme Court, and that will determine whether or not the Clackamas County actions in placing Commissioners Humberston, Kalani, and kind of major question mark around SOA on the Clackamas River Water Board. So that is what the bill is about. It has been forwarded to me.
Okay. So they'll take care of it?
Yes, I will take care of it.
Very good.
I have, oh, I'm sorry, are you finished?
Yeah, he's done.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a piece of business that we need to take care of as the board. The Tansen-Leachman investigative report that was authorized by the board in response to the complaints filed against Clackamas River Water Commissioner Sterling and myself by Clackamas River Water employee Vance Boyles, was given to Ms. Leachman for the purpose of determining whether Commissioner Sterling or I were in the course of our CRW role, so that, because Oregon tort law requires the entity to assume defense cost for board members in that circumstance. Ms. Leachman's report clearly states that Commissioner Sterling was in course and scope. And we have the kind of unfortunate circumstance where Mr. Moore and our newly retained legal counsel, Dean Phillips, have declared a conflict of interest between Clackamas River Water and each of us in that connection. And so I move that the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners authorize Commissioner Sterling to retain legal counsel at CRW expense per Oregon tort law to represent him in the Vance Foles bully complaint and tort claim.
It's not an agendized item. We can't act on that at this time. It's not an emergency.
You can. It's up to Chair Soa. And I would point out that this is actively currently under investigation. The Bali investigator has made contact for interviews. And if the board decides not to meet its obligation, I think, first of all, you certainly are not behaving correctly toward Commissioner Sterling, nor are you following Oregon tort law. So I do believe that it would be appropriate to take it up at this point. This only just happened in the last day that we received notice of the interviews. So it truly is an emergency. It could not have been handled earlier.
Well, I would want advice of counsel before I make a decision of that nature, frankly.
Council's the one who sent it out.
And his advice is that it shouldn't be done at this point?
Now, Mr. Hubbardston, it was posted on the Clackamas River Water website for months. Surely you're familiar with it.
I'm just asking you a question. You can answer the question.
Council advised the board that the board should send it for investigation. The board did send it for investigation. The board received the report in August. And
as I recall in reading the report, the situation regarding yourself was clear that we don't...
I'm not discussing myself,
I understand that.
Mr.
I understand that. But it was questionable one way or the other with respect to Mr. Sterling.
If you're going to take that, I do hope you don't take that position.
Hope springs eternal. But quite frankly, I'm going to reiterate what I've said before. And that is that the reason that we're having the problems that we're having and have been having for some time is the constant litigation because of the behavior of some members of this board. And
Point of order.
I'm not particularly interested in engaging in any more litigation than we absolutely have to. So,
The decision is
but I understand.
the board president's, whether to allow it on the agenda or not. It's your decision to allow my motion to proceed or not.
If you can get a second, I think we ought to move forward.
I'll second it.
You can't.
Oh,
I mean, you can, but you shouldn't.
well, I'll go ahead and do it anyway, because they're not going to. And if they want to choose to file an ethical complaint, I look forward to receiving it and taking it forward.
Discussion of the motion.
I've said what we've got to say.
Tell us again what the motion is to pay for.
I move that the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners authorize Commissioner Grafton Sterling to retain legal counsel at CRW expense to represent him in the Vance Boyles bully complaint and tort claim.
Thank you. We have public comment. Sandy?
I too have read the report that came out, and I question Commissioner Holloway's interpretation of the conclusions. Although Commissioner Holloway is correct that I believe the investigator didn't find any current information that would lead you to believe that there was any malfeasance. However, I would encourage the board to, if they're going to look at this measure at all at this time, that they look at a fixed fee to be spent on legal expense for the commissioner, since he is not utilizing this particular way that this is written does not allow Commissioner Sterling to go through the legal facilities of CRW. It's having CRW having to pay for his legal expense. When something came up where legal expenses had to be looked at by the county commissioners, they authorized a fixed rate, I think it was $4,000 or $5,000, to be authorized for that particular board commissioner to be spent towards the legal expenses, and left it at that. I would recommend that you look at either a fixed amount of money to be set aside if you want to do that for the commissioner, or that the commissioner be instructed to utilize the legal, the attorney provided by CRW.
Can't do that.
This particular, excuse me, Commissioner, I have the floor. Thank you. The way that this particular motion is written, sir, only allows you to pay for whatever legal expense this commissioner then procures. And I think it's too open-ended for CRW to undertake at this time. So either, as a ratepayer, I'm very suspect of this particular issue. And it doesn't preclude you from seeing where the outcome comes and making a decision to reimburse Commissioner Sterling, or in that event, maybe even reimbursing Commissioner Holloway in the future. But it doesn't require you to pay for their legal expenses at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Margaret.
Barbara Kemper recently resigned commissioner, one of the two who resigned, so the commissioner, so the district could get appropriate insurance. It's been a while since I've read the Tamsin Leachman report, and it was pretty explicit, as I recall, in saying that there was only one very minor incident of all of the incidents that were addressed in this bully complaint in regard to Commissioner Sterling that took place while he was a commissioner. That most of the other incidents that are discussed in this bully complaint took place before he was a commissioner. And as I recall, her conclusion was that those were of a nature that would have been inappropriate if he'd been a commissioner, that they were just not good. But at any rate, that there was only this one tiny issue during that time. And certainly if there is any consideration to giving any kind of coverage to Commissioner Sterling for this issue, I would request that it be absolutely limited to that one issue, and that there be a price cap put on it. Thank you.
Chair Sullivan?
Yes.
I actually had prepared a motion and looked at it at home, and I was going to suggest that the hourly rate be capped at the same hourly rate as the attorney that CRW retained, which I recall is about $275 an hour.
You want to read it?
Oh, thank you, yeah. Super. These computers are good for something.
Clarify it, you're going to read restated.
Oh, well,
motion.
I'm sorry, $300 an hour. So I had planned to do that, and I would certainly be very happy to, if I may, ask for indulgence and just read it.
You're restating your motion?
If I may, Chair Sullivan, with your permission. I move that as the independent investigator determined that Commissioner Grafton L. Sterling has not acted outside the course and scope of his duties relative to the Vance Royals Bureau of Labor and Industries complaint and tort complaint against Commissioner Sterling, that one, the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners authorized Commissioner Sterling to retain legal defense representation of his own choice to be paid by CRW at a rate not to exceed the hourly rate paid to Clackamas River Water Legal Counsel relative to the Vance Royals Bureau of Labor and Industries complaint and tort complaint, but in no case no more than $300 per hour, and that the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners acknowledges the conflict of interest between Commissioner Sterling and Clackamas River Water as declared by Clackamas River Water General Manager Lee E. Moore Sr. and Clackamas River Water Legal Counsel Dean Phillips. And 3, the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners agrees that due to the conflict of interest, Clackamas River Water and its agents, employees, and representatives shall not be privy to attorney work product or material falling under attorney-client privilege produced by legal counsel representing Commissioner Sterling. Parenthetically, I would say that the CRW referred it to outside counsel. That counsel report has been withheld from Commissioner Sterling and me. And this is all in writing from Dean Phillips. So clearly there is a conflict of interest. And just as Mr. Moore and Mr. Phillips have determined to withhold their confidential information from Commissioner Sterling and me, it seems appropriate for the reverse to apply. So, I do agree that a cap is good. I think that that's appropriate. So, if somebody wants to second that would be fine.
Excuse me, President, so is there a motion in this?
That was the motion.
That was the motion.
I already
Yeah.
was a motion.
Restated motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from the general manager. Do you have any comment on this, Mr. Moore?
We have a legal opinion from Mr. Phillips, who has basically said that should the board elect to provide Commissioner Sterling with legal representation, that counsel would be appointed by CRW and would work on Mr. Sterling's behalf at the direction of CRW. That under the Tort Claims Act, that the board has that authority. And that's the legal opinion that I've been operating under as it relates to this particular issue. And the prior board had indicated that once Ms. Tampson had completed her report, that issue would be taken up again. So it's appropriate that it be discussed here. But in terms of the legal advice, the motion appears to go beyond the advice that we already have on the table that we paid for.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to table till March on this issue.
Chair Sullivan.
Second.
If I may comment, these interviews are going to be held within minutes.
There was a
motion to
motion.
table is in order.
Refresh me, do we have to have a second on the table?
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Chair, so you weren't even going to allow discussion on it?
No.
No discussion.
Table.
Motion to
All right.
table. I just say that I was partially prepared a couple of months ago to discuss this issue, but I'm not prepared today to look into all sides of it. So that'll give me a month to make a decision.
If I may, you have, as you are aware, effectively denied him that protection because this interview process is going to take place before the next meeting. So, and I would also point out
Was that, I'm sorry, excuse me?
that all of that claim arose out of a planning session on October the 13th, 2011, that and other actions. And those plans were made by Mr. Moore, Ms. Kemper, Ms. Kehoe, Mr. Cardwell, and Mr. Phillips. And that is a part of this investigation. And that is one reason why confidentiality is absolutely essential.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall, this issue was on the agenda on either November or December, and the commissioners requested that it be removed from the agenda at that time. So the emergent nature of it is as a result of their own actions that they requested. So I would like to have the 30 days the chair has requested to review this myself.
Dr. Silla,
Yes.
that's completely false. I don't know where he came up with that. Lowly has phoned us and contacted both of us and said that they want to conclude it on March 6th. That's their request. It is not Commissioner Holloway's request. It is not my request. We have gone forward and complied with their request for documentation, answers, everything. Where he comes up with it's our fault is some sort of creative Dunsmuir thought or whatever. But it is Bowley that is going forward with it.
It's my understanding that you made a request in either the November or December agenda for compensation for this, and you requested that it be taken off the agenda at that time. And it is the compensation that is to which I am referring. So, again, the emergent nature is of your own doing and not of ours. So we'll need the time to review the thing and come to a conclusion at that point.
Yes, I have just one more board issue,
Yes.
if I may. Commissioner Humberston has claimed reimbursement for the unnoticed Clackamas River Water new commissioner orientation meeting. That is not an appropriate charge. It's not a public meeting. And so I recommend that Mr. Humberston reimburse CRW for that.
I'll defer to the general manager and the finance director, and if that submission is incorrect, I'll return the $50. But my understanding was that was appropriate to put in for, which is why I did.
It's a
If I'm-
board decision, not theirs.
If I am incorrect, according to board policy, I would be more than happy to refund the money. I had one item under board communication. Commissioner Holloway had contacted me via email regarding a change in the form that we fill out when we submit our request for reimbursement of funds. And there was a change made. The original wording was, I hereby certify that the following is true and factual, and that I'm authorized to receive the amounts claimed which accurately reflect only public activity in accordance with the proper authority and requirements of my position. It was subsequently changed to, I hereby certify under penalties of perjury and other laws regarding falsification of records and or official misconduct, the above request for reimbursement to be accurate and complete, and further certify I'm authorized to receive reimbursement as a part of my authorized duty as a CRW commissioner. The complaint apparently was that that change got made without, how do you phrase that? It escaped my notice until now that the general manager altered this form on June 22nd, 2012 without authorization from the board. On June 14th, 2012, the motion was made by Barbara that I move that all commissioner requests for reimbursements and compensation under CRW board policy section 1.6 shall be paid upon submission and approval for accuracy by the CFO. And the specific wording regarding perjury that was added into that was at your request, which can be noted at, I think it's minute 41, second 28 of the minutes of the meeting of June 14. So just to refresh your memory on that.
But
And
the
that's all I
wording,
had today. So it was in fact changed at the request of the board.
If I may just say, I'm sorry. However, the wording, this wording was not submitted to the board. I agree that perjury should be in there, but not the rest of it. And that was all, that it was my request to the board for a discussion. It's no more
Well,
complicated.
there was a motion to actually do it, we got none.
He additional public comment before we close the meeting?
Brian Johnson. I happened to be at that meeting you're talking about. It was taken off.
Yeah, the microphone might not be, you may have to speak up, sir.
I was at that meeting you were talking about and it was taken off.
Okay,
So you're right.
thank you.
And so we notice here tonight, we're gonna pay $17,000 for a special election for that call. So at this time, I guess I'll ask her to resign and save the ratepayer $17,000. You know, you can come out
Address
here
your
and what
questions
do.
to
You
the
come out
chair,
here and what
right?
do. The chief's
Mr. Sully?
right.
He's addressing a question to you, I believe.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm asking her to resign. I guess I'm sorry.
I understand. All I
Because
have
she
to
goes
say
around
is,
here complaining that it's free out here.
all I have to say is, we welcome Johnson City to the
As they say in the Navy, welcome aboard, sailor.
Very politically correct answer, Chair Sully.
And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you for the effort.
I wasn't going there.